Hey everyone, hope you're doing really well. It's pretty exciting starting to build these videos and cover these basics. It's going to get a lot more advanced fairly quickly. But again, we're just taking it really slow and going over these, what they call building blocks of HTML. And we'll start to create more content with the more that we learn. So it'll get pretty fun here. So let's dive in for today's lesson, and we're going to talk about specifically the image tag again, and we're going to talk about the paragraph element and the link. So we'll cover those and kind of how to structure and add content to our website and how we do that. So why don't we start first with what they call the paragraph element, or the P tag. So it's extremely simple. Simply P. And then inside of our paragraph element, we put text. Now, we could be just like everybody else and use what's called lorem ipsum. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. Well, that's boring, right? This is the Rich Edmonds show, and we're going to do some cool stuff here. So we've got something called force ipsum. It's all about Star Wars. So of course we want to use Star Wars text, not some boring gibberish that no one knows what it's saying. So we can copy and paste and put that in here. And then we have a few things going on. We've got some wrapping. So sometimes we can have our text editor wrap the lines, or we can have it all in one line. It's all up to you and your preference. As long as it starts with an opening paragraph and we've got our closing paragraph, it's okay. It doesn't really matter what it looks like. Sometimes we can get caught up on these details. I know for me, it happens. Back here to our site, refresh. Now we've got some content. This is a great way to add just regular paragraph text, or any text that goes on your website. We wouldn't want to necessarily do this. We wouldn't want to just do div and then put text in there. Why? Well, because let's see what happens. Looks the same. This isn't a div, this isn't a paragraph. Notice here we don't have any margin. Here we've got some margins. Now we'll start talking about margins and spacing in CSS, but this markup basically means nothing. It's just text. This markup that is also text, but is in a paragraph tag, so it has more meaning to the browsers and specifically search engines. So we always want to make sure our text is in the proper tag. We don't want to just throw text just anywhere. It would want to have a certain meaning. This looks like a paragraph, but it is not in a paragraph tag. Can't tell you how many times I see this, and it's just kind of frustrating because when we start adding our styles, for instance, let me show you this. What if on our P elements, we had a font size of 20? Great. Well, what happened here? Well, this wasn't in a paragraph, so now what do we have to do? Now I got to go target some random element, or maybe the body element, to have a certain font size or something, but that doesn't relate to necessarily this div. So we always want to make sure that all of our text is in its proper elements, because we'll run into troubles later and then your website doesn't necessarily look consistent. So something to think about. Really simple, but it can have consequences later on down the road. So there's the paragraph. Great. Now what happens when we want to put some stuff inside this paragraph? What can we put inside a paragraph? Well, we could put links, right? What if we want to put this holding her is dangerous in a link? How would we do that? Well, first we can select our text. And a little shortcut here that wraps whatever my selection is in tags. So again, that's why I like this editor, so I don't have to manually type that out. We're going to use the A tag, which we learned about previously up here, but we're going to go a little bit more into details. What do we need? Well, we need to know, where is this link going? Where do we want this to go? Well, what if we just use the link of where this text came from? So we copy that URL, paste it into here, hit save, refresh, and there is our link. Doesn't look that great. We have a lot of options here. Again, we'll get into some CSS and make this stuff look much better. But for now, this is pretty clear that this text is underlined and that it is a link. So we can click on it, and what's going to happen? It takes us right to that page. That's great. But now we just left our website, right? Maybe not so ideal. How do we fix that? Well, the link element does have some attributes. One of them is called target. And what are we targeting? Well, it has some values, and those values are, there's about 4 of them, I believe. There's self, there's blank, or there's, I can't remember some of the other ones off the top of my head. Anyways, the one that we're interested in, well, here, if we were to say this, we've got self. What does that do? That simply just says, target this link on this page. That's kind of what the default is, but we want to open this link in a new page, right? So we would do target blank. Let's see what that does. Refresh. We can't notice anything here. We can see that in the DOM. We click on this. All right, it opens in a new window. Pretty snazzy. Now, we're going to go just a tad deeper on that. Okay, you might think we got the job done. Well, again, it always pays to look up, make sure we're using things correctly. Now, there are some security concerns, at least at the time of this recording, which are soon to be addressed, but it's always just good practice. Anytime you're linking to another a web page or website, you want to let the referrer know, or also prevent any other type of actions happening when that click happens. So without going into too great detail, what we need to do is anytime we have a target blank, we want to put this rel attribute on here. We specifically want to say no opener. You can read more about this. Again, I don't want to go too deep for us beginners here, but basically anytime you use this, we also want to have this on here, and that just kind of protects us. So again, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. There we go. That opens our link into a new tab in our browser. So, and again, whatever text is in between our element here, it becomes the link. So here's what gets kind of interesting. We can actually put other elements inside of that link and make it a link. So what am I talking about? Well, first, before we get into that, why don't we go add a new piece of content here. That's called the image. Now we kind of covered the image up here with the logo. So we've got the source, right? What does this link to? Now I've gone ahead here and added some interesting images for this video, so it keeps everyone's interest. So we've got a knife, specifically in the forest. Let's see what that looks like. All right, this is a massive image of a knife in the forest. Great. Okay, well, I think we get the point. Okay, we have an alt tag, which we've talked about. Now that provides text about the image, and it also helps for SEO and accessibility in case this image for some reason didn't load. Why don't we look at that? Say we have a typo, but we know that it was a knife that was in the forest, right? We refresh this. Okay, so that image is broken because we mistyped it. It didn't load, but somebody could say, hey, at least I know that this particular image had to do with a knife in a forest. What happens if we didn't have that? Well, nothing. I don't even know that there's really an image there other than, you know, this console error. So even though this isn't great to have a broken image, it's always a good practice to provide that fallback text for the image. Now, I missed this on the link, but there's another, perhaps what they call global attribute, and it's called title. So if I'm hovering over this stuff, I can kind of look in the bottom left corner there, you know, what that links to. Down here, I don't get anything. But if we put what's called a title attribute and then give it some text, Star Wars. And let's throw this title. Whoa, sorry. I'm not used to having my editors this far zoomed in, but it really helps for people watching the video, so that way they can see what's happening here. So why don't we just call this knife forest as well. Okay, refresh that. Now if we hover over this link, we can see the text Star Wars. That's pretty nifty. What happens about this image? Oh, so when we hover over the image, we get that little title of kind of describing what the element is or what it's doing. So that's really good for SEO as well as kind of letting your users know maybe what a little bit more about the link, like holding her is dangerous. Well, why? You know, I don't know anything about this text. Why is it saying that? Oh, it relates to Star Wars. Okay, well now I'm not so you know, geez, what is that link going to? You know, so yeah, it has its benefits. So again, we talked about putting stuff inside this link tag, right? Could we put an image in there? Absolutely. So let's try that out. Let's just grab this same link here. Actually, we'll just write a new link. So we got our link. All we need. Now watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to enter down on a new line because I know we've got so much stuff over here on the screen. We can't even see everything that's going on. So it's always best anytime you're nesting elements to kind of put them on a new line and then indent one so we can see that there's a clear hierarchy of what's happening. So we know that this element is inside of this link. Let's refresh. What happens? Do we see anything different? Well, yeah, we do. See our cursor? It changed to a little hand there. So we know that this particular image links somewhere. So that's pretty handy. So we can make almost anything a link. Now, back in the day, the link element, it's still we call an inline element, which means that it's not going to float anywhere. But we weren't able to add just any element inside of it, and that's kind of changed. And we'll get into in another video kind of about how do we validate this HTML? How do we know that what we're really doing is good or proper or best practices? So I want to show that off as well as we kind of start to add more and talk about some of these elements. We should always be validating our HTML, especially as we're starting out and learning, because we can actually learn quite a bit from that validator to kind of know best practices, best attributes, deprecated attributes, those types of things. Cool. So we've kind of learned about that, learned about some text. I want to cover a couple more things here about the image so we don't have such a long video that you're all bored. So how do we, this image is massive, right? Like what's going on here? Why is it taking over my screen? How can we kind of control this? By default, we don't really want our images to have what's called a width and a height, but we can put that on there. So we can say width maybe 300, and then we want a height. Why don't we just make this a square, see what it looks like. Let's refresh. So there we go. Now we've got a width and height of 300 pixels for our image. But yeah, why wouldn't we want to do this? Well, we have what's called responsive images, right? Because as we start to scale our browser down here, see if I can kind of show this off of maybe why we wouldn't want to do this. And in fact, to really showcase this point, why don't we bump this up to like 800 by 800? Okay, so as we can see, as soon as my browser starts becoming smaller, the image isn't doing anything. In fact, we get these terrible scroll bars, right? Because that image is a very set width and height, it's not going to change. But there's a way to kind of get our image to have a certain width and height without kind of breaking the browser as we start to scroll down for our mobile websites. So that's something we want to get into. So just know that we can kind of control the size with these attributes, but it's not really best practices. In fact, images, I'd like to do a whole huge, good long video about images in general and kind of handle how we handle some of these things, because we've got sizes, we've got source set, we've got performance and loading. So there's lots to do with the image tag, but just for right now, as we're starting out and we're learning, we just need to know that, hey, it's got a source, we give it a link to where that's located, we give it an alt attribute. The title is optional. I think it just depends on how you're using it and what you might be using it for. That's great. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, it's going to get a lot more exciting and fun. Just so you know, if you have questions or something doesn't make sense or you'd like to see a better example or whatever it is, just drop them in the comments. The whole focus of this is to help teach developers or people that are looking to grow into this career, whatever it is. I just want to help and kind of give that mentorship that I wish I really had when I was starting out, because I never really got that, and I had tons of these questions, and it just took me years to kind of figure this stuff out on my own. And so that's kind of my whole purpose of this. I'm really excited to teach it, and yeah, I hope you all like it. So yeah, let me know anything that I need to cover better. I'm not really trying to edit these videos. I just want to keep it raw, real, and explain it as if you're sitting right next to me. So hopefully you kind of get that feeling. We're going to learn some of these things together. I'm going to kind of go over how I learned some of these elements. We're going to cover elements that I've never used before, because why not? And we can kind of learn them together, and I can show you that process. We're going to really just kind of get more of the natural, how do we learn how to code websites? I don't want to create these videos that are just so perfect and edited to the T that everything just looks so simple. I kind of want to give more of the, hey, this is real life. This is how real developers actually code these things. So that's kind of the purpose. So we'll get into that and have a lot of fun along the way. So I hope you're enjoying it, and let me know if you like it or not. Okay, cool, thanks. We'll see you in the next one.